And a very special good morning, everybody. Great to be with you here on the morning briefing. Jeff DeForest, Mike Lubie, Lubitz, NoFilter.net, Caffeine TV, and a variety of other platforms. And what was the old joke, Lubie? How did it go? I may have this juxtaposed. I may have this one backwards, where I went to a hockey game and a boxing match broke out. Is it that way? Or I went to a boxing match and a hockey game broke out? I think it's the other way.
I think it's the first one.
You think it's the first one? It's possible that who was big with that joke? Was that Rodney Dangerfield? I went to a boxing match and a hockey game broke out. I think that's the line, Louie. I think that's the line. But whatever line it is that you're looking at, and I have some things about very scientific handicapping that went into yesterday's events, talking about the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks, and of course the Panthers going against the Boston Bruins. That turned into a bloodbath, and the Edmonton Oilers, Vancouver. Interesting theories on all three games. But if you are betting, BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season. From MLB, which we're hot as a pistol with our under on the Marlins, inside information, always a good thing to have. Golf, NBA, NHL playoff stats, all available BetOnline. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. And even if you hate the team, but you want to bet on them, you can do it right there at BetOnline. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, which everybody's into. That's your generation, Louie. It may even be your son's generation.
Yep.
It is all over player props. Odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on all the action. Bet online where the game starts. That looked like a throwback, didn't it, to like Detroit and the Colorado Avalanche when they had that rivalry going, and the puck didn't even hit the ice yet. And all 10 players on the ice, maybe even all 12, because I think even the goalies dropped the gloves before the action started. They hated each other. Yeah. And that seems to be the case with the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins. Was there a message being sent there after the Bruins realized they were hopelessly out of this thing? Because you don't usually see that as much in the postseason. Maybe this represents somewhat of an evolution in the thinking of NHL teams, players, coaches, management, sabermetrics, whatever it is that's guiding this movement, because you didn't used to see a lot of silly penalties being taken in the postseason, and you certainly didn't see a lot of fights. Nobody wanted to subject themselves to maybe losing a player in a game misconduct or a 5-minute fighting penalty. And yet this game last night, what was something, it looked like the tail end of WrestleMania, didn't it? I really was waiting for somebody to just scream out our favorite saying, McMahon, I'm coming for you. But all the people that thought, and there were some really high and mighty Bostonians that live in South Florida that were all over social media saying, I don't hear a sound coming out of anybody in South Florida. You can hear the rats hitting the ice. And sure enough, the Panthers turn around, reverse this thing, and it really did. It wasn't one of those scenes that you saw in The Godfather, where James Caan completely swings and misses and the guy goes flopping back. That's for the NBA.
Yeah.
These guys were hammering each other, and that series now stands at 1 apiece. And I think the Boston Bruins message was, you know what, guys? The stone crab ain't shit. You're going to be eating clam chowder out of a dog bowl after you come up to Boston here. But be ready to fight. That was a pretty good reversal of form by the Florida Panthers last night, convincing me that maybe they weren't in a malaise, and maybe it was rest over rust or whatever. But they managed to turn it around and turn it up and end up winning 6-1 last night going away.
Well, look, to me, it was one team handled tough times a lot better than the other. When the Panthers were getting annihilated in game one, you could tell. Look, and we had our friend who's a renowned chef down here, and he's also the brother-in-law of
Roberto Luongo,
Reno Sobrone, who knows his hockey. And he said, look, the way they came out, whether it was rust, whatever you call it, you can't have that. And they knew it.
I think he used a word like pussies, which probably wasn't appropriate for anything except no filter.
He used that word. I don't think we did, but now you have.
All right.
He said, look, the way that they came out, that's not, and I know this group too. He's like, they're not going to let it hit them, but they do not like to lose, and they play for one another. You're going to see a very different effort. And I think it's interesting that they took that loss in stride and came out and played their asses off in game two. And the Boston Bruins were a bunch of fucking children. The Boston Bruins were getting fucking pummeled. Look, early on, they got a goal in the first 9-10 minutes. They controlled that game. And then the rest of the game, the Panthers fucking dominated them from one point to the other. Bobrovsky was not only good, but he didn't have to do much. Finally, their defense was fantastic, and they controlled the puck for most of the game. And on top of that, they pissed off. The Bruins were frustrated, and they really couldn't get anything going. And instead of handling like the Panthers in game one, they handled it like fucking children. And they're like, okay, let's just fight them, and maybe we'll get guys tossed. I think it backfired because Matthew Tkachuk, their best player, Pasternak, he beat the living shit out of Pasternak. He literally threw him to the fucking.
You don't usually see punches landed that cleanly in a hockey fight.
It was like a barroom brawl. He had him sized up and was beating the shit out of him. And what's great is everything was even, so it's not like they actually got into the Panthers' head. And all the Panthers did was kept scoring. Like it didn't stop them from playing.
I like that Matt Tkachuk's father is always in the crowd there, and it doesn't matter. The father and the mother are both watching their son slamming a guy's head into the ice with the possibility that it just as easily could have been him, and they're laughing about it.
Yep.
What kind of constitution, what kind of makeup do you have to be a hockey parent? Now, I know Walt Tkachuk played in the NHL and was a tough customer.
Keith Tkachuk.
Keith Tkachuk, right. Yeah. I'm talking.
He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, but he was a great player, and he seems to understand what the makeup of a NHL player has to be. But Tkachuk came flying off the top rope. He looked like Ty Domi in boxing shoes. I mean, it was unbelievable. Just came flying in there and took on Pasternak. So that series has set a tone that has made it very compelling and must watch TV. Whether you're a fan of either team or not, you would want to see how Game 3 starts out. See if they calm things down.
They were saying for a 6-1 game, the crowd's still really into it. Like
of
it was
course.
the most exciting 6-1 game ever.
They loved the fights. Nobody cared. Nobody cared if the puck was even on the ice. If the refs even dropped it, they just were waiting for everybody to drop the gloves. I was hoping for a goalie fight. I really was.
You almost got there.
I know Swayman got pulled from the game there, which the guy had been dynamite for the Boston Bruins. But you could also say, if you were a handicapper, that perhaps he's due to fall apart and throw in his stinker. He had been averaging 2 goals or less. I don't think he'd allowed more than 2 goals in any playoff game, and he had taken over the number 1 slot when all season long the Bruins had just been alternating goaltenders as if they were equals. And unfortunately for them, they ran out of gas there. And even when they brought in the second goaltender, it was to no avail as the Panthers just continued to power the puck into the net and run away with that game 6-1. The other game, I read some interesting handicapping yesterday, and I like to allude to this because it all started when they started running little snippets of Brent Musburger's Vegas Sports Information Network handicappers in my beloved New York Post. And I would imagine this was featured in other newspapers around the country, although how many newspapers are left in the country? Let's see. You got the LA Times. Yeah, can you count them on one hand? I'm not sure. I got one right here, believe it or not. I have it. And I'm always enthralled with the logic that goes into some of the handicapping. They have a thing called Action Sports now. I'm not sure if that was a takeover. I think Musburger's outfit is still in action. Yes. And not to, are they Action Sports? I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure they still operate.
I want them to be the same because they're both dreadful at making handicapping opinions.
It's funny, though. They're brilliant, though, in the analysis. Lubie, I'm telling you, if you read the story about the Pacers and the Knicks game that this guy had put together in recommending that you go ahead and take the Pacers, maybe a little taste on the money line and certainly getting the 5 points last night from the New York Knicks, and it might have even dropped to 4.5. You would have had to agree with this guy that this was pristine logic. It was unbelievable. He was talking about the key word with Pacers, of course, is pace, P-A-C-E. Yes. And the Pacers play at one of the hottest levels in terms of possessions. They get almost 100 possessions a game in the games they're involved in, which, it doesn't seem all that significant, but it's a difference of about 3-4 possessions from what is normally done, and especially the New York Knicks who like to slow things down. Yep. And so he made a very, very brilliant case. I mean, Einstein couldn't have written this any better. Did Einstein write? No, he just invented shit and did math. But you couldn't have written a better case for the Indiana Pacers last night. And, of course, they ended up losing by 9, even though Brunson missed half the game and then came back in. I mean, holy Willis Reed, what are we looking at here? And, Lubie, you still refuse to acknowledge your thing saying this guy is so weak at the defensive end of the court that you couldn't possibly consider him for MVP candidacy, which went once again to Nikola Jokic, with Brunson finishing a very distant 5th. And what was really surprising, 7th in the voting was Anthony Edwards. You don't think he was valuable to the Minnesota Timberwolves? What are the Timberwolves without Anthony Edwards? They're a bunch of good guys that couldn't do shit.
It's funny you say that's good. To me, are you saying that's bad? I guess to me, for a guy that no one talks about because he's 22, At least he's getting on the radar. The Brunson stuff's whatever to me. Look, he's a good player. The guy is a really good scorer. He also isn't an all-around player. Like they're trying to put him in this conversation with SGA and Anthony Edwards for these playoffs. Both of those guys are scoring at a very similar rate, and they both are the best defensive players on their, like, as good as Gobert is. Gobert actually isn't. Edwards is everywhere. Like Edwards is actually the one setting the tone defensively. It's not Gobert for these Timberwolves. And Gilgeous-Alexander's the same thing. He's an all NBA caliber defensive player. Like Brunson, they literally take him out on defense. So to me, to even put him in the same breath is ridiculous. And even a Luka, he does everything on offense. At least he's an elite passer. He's already an all-time great passer. He's an elite rebounder. I mean, Luka's a really good rebounder and is elite scorer all over the court. Brunson's a really good mid-range three-point shooter, and he's great at flopping when he has any contact. That's what Brunson is, and he's a really good player, and he's made not only a career of it, he's become an elite all-star at it. So I'm not judging him on that. But when they're like the best player in the playoffs, I'm like, dude, are you watching what these other guys are doing? Like, and that's the other thing too. When you're not expending energy on defense, you should score 40-something fucking points. Like Edwards is scoring at a very similar rate, and he's a fucking dog on defense. Like the fact that he has that much energy on both ends of the court is utterly astounding. It just goes to their credit, and it's not a discredit to Brunson. It's why, to me, there is a different level with what we're seeing on the court. Also, again, the Knicks are getting every benefit of the doubt. Literally, Hartenstein double dribbled. It was blatant. They called a double dribble. Then out of nowhere, because Tom Thibodeau, your favorite schlep, yelled at them, they're like, oh, yeah, never mind. It's not a double dribble. It's like, how does that? I don't even know how does that work. Even Reggie Miller on the call was like, that's not a, like, we heard the whistle. And the play-by-play guy was like, yeah, they blew a whistle and there was a double dribble. And for some reason now there's not a double dribble.
Who got more resoundingly booed yesterday? Marjorie Taylor Greene when she tried to remove Mike Johnson as the Speaker of the House, or Reggie Miller when he walked into Madison Square Garden, where the Knicks fans absolutely despise this guy. Of course, fueled largely by a lot of popping off that went on between the Pacers and the Knicks when there was a big rivalry there. And those 8 points in a half a second that he scored that ruined the Knicks certainly will never be forgotten. It's surprising that James Dolan didn't subject Reggie Miller to that facial identification thing that he has going, so he can keep guys like Charles Oakley out of the Madison Square Garden arena there, and not allow certain people that he finds look upon him in disfavor to have access to Knick games. That was pretty wild. The Timberwolves, speaking of them, I mean, does Anthony Edwards put it on once again? And are we looking at the elimination of the MVP, Nikola Jokic? It's hard to argue that he isn't the most valuable player, because if you take him out of the Nuggets lineup, what do you really have? I mean, I know Jamal Murray's a good player, but you have nothing in terms of being championship caliber material. The same could be said of others. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ended up finishing second from the Oklahoma City Thunder, but it was unlikely that his somewhat lack of recognition around the league, and especially among fans, as being this elite player, was going to propel him past Nikola Jokic. And who's voting on this anyway? A bunch of ink-stained wretches that never see a basketball game? That's possible. It's always like, the interest that you have in the Hall of Fame balloting, and you're wondering, who are these guys? When did this guy write for the Chicago Sun-Times? 40 years ago? He still has a vote? You got to be fucking kidding me. Of course this guy's a Hall of Famer. And then in the hockey game, there was an equally eloquently written and reasoned dissertation about how Edmonton was going to blow out the Vancouver Canucks last night, which it looked like they were going to. I mean, they were up 2-0 in this game, and the Canucks, I didn't make it all the way to the wire there, because that game ended at about 2 a.m, probably Eastern time. But the Canucks did come back and win 5-4. So you had two amazingly written doctoral theses on wagering on a couple of games in last night's action, and both dead wrong. Now, this is coming from a guy that just gave you the last place horse in the Derby, a near impossibility. There used to be a thing where if you picked the horse that ran last, you got your money back at certain casinos.
That's a talent.
It's very difficult to do. I mean, once in a while, you'll see some nutbag owner puts a horse in there that should be running at Beulah Park, and you're thinking, okay, and the horse always takes the lead right out of the gate, leads for about a half a furlong, looks like a rabbit in a mile race, back when they used to put a guy in there that was somewhat of a sprinter, and he would run a half mile at a really fast pace, and everybody would just let him go, and then he would just sort of run off the track. Remember that? You're watching track and field meets, and the rabbit would just run off the track, and now the race is on. Here comes Eamon Coughlin, the Irishman. He really knows how to turn it on the inside on the boards. He was the chairman of the boards, after all. A lot of good milers were around at that time. John Walker, New Zealand, very distinguished. Steve Scott out of Upland, California. I remember covering those events, and you were always thinking, why doesn't the rabbit just try to win the fucking race? He's ahead by 10 lengths. Keep going, man. Keep going. Breathe deep. Get your breathing right, and maybe you can eke this thing out. You like that when you see a horse go out by 50, and you're thinking, can he hang on?
Yep.
But very difficult to pinpoint the last place horse in any race. I don't care what race you're watching. I think it's harder to pick the last place horse than it is to pick the first place horse. We managed to give that to you. So here we are talking smack, talking like, we're some tough schmuck about two handicappers that did brilliant research. But nonetheless, just as easy as they can separate you from your money, they handed you a couple of losers. All right, action tonight, Lubie. Celtics, Cavs, 13 and a hook. You were willing to give the 11 and a half the other day with the Celtics. There was no reason to think that they can't win by just as wide a margin. Did the Cavaliers figure out a way to stay in this game?
Yeah.
And the bettors can take advantage of a very generous playoff offering. I mean, when do you see the second round of the playoffs at 13 and a half point spread without a major injury to take into consideration?
Look, again, Garland and Mobley didn't do much, and Derek White, he outscored Tatum. So I feel like at some point that's got to come back to the pack. So I'm going to keep riding the Cavs to cover. I don't know if they're not winning. I think they'll just win this series in 5 or 6, but I think they'll cover. I mean, that's a lot. 13 and a hook. And they were in most of that game until like the middle second half. And then eventually they couldn't keep up. But I'm going to go Cavs too, because Mitchell's playing well. And it's time for him to get some help. And hopefully he finally does tonight.
All right, Wolves, did they make it 3-0? I think they do. I think it's over for the Denver Nuggets. I wouldn't have said that a couple of days ago, but I believe the way they looked in these first two games at home, not very promising. I think you're looking at Minnesota just being a quicker, better team overall at this point than the Denver Nuggets. Hard to say because we didn't see a lot of comparisons during the regular. Everybody just assumed the Nuggets were going to turn it on again at the end of the regular season. They coasted in there. I mean, look, they I think finished in a dead heat with the Timberwolves record-wise, but lost a tiebreaker on conference record or whatever, or a division record, something really stupid like that. But nonetheless, they've been dominated so far, and I'm thinking that probably continues tonight. So you might want to go the other way on that and take the imagine you're getting 4.5 points with the Nuggets in a playoff game where they're in absolute desperation mode, because if they lose this, a pivotal game 3,
it's done.
Then you would have to say that it's time to throw up the white flag and maybe toss the towel in there and grab the spit bucket and say, hey, you know what, kid? We'll come back. We'll fight another day. That's the way that it's going to go. Ohtani interpreter pleading guilty. 17 million was the number. We told you that a long time ago. Remember, we said this number was not going to be anywhere around $4 million. We had that on some decent inside information directly pretty much from the source, that Boyer guy that was booking all of the bets. And I would think maybe he gets a little favorable ruling from the judge there. The judge, he likes you. It's like Midnight Express. Life for what? Because he gave them what they wanted, and that was a big splash that the people in the FBI and the authorities in California are on top of this evil gambling ring, and they found the guy that was the culprit. $17 million in losses this guy had, huh? Or was he just drafting money out of Ohtani's account for other things? Did he drive a Bentley or anything? I'm not sure. Imagine that. My mother, I can hear her from the grave saying, all that money, and you have nothing to show for it? How much fun could it be? Will he be betting for prison? I don't know.
Exactly.
That's it for him. Huh? I mean, that's like 33 years he's facing. I would imagine, he gets somewhere from 10 to 15 years for this thing for pleading guilty and sayonara, as they say. All right, we have to get out of here. Lubie, congratulations to your mother-in-law. You're going to her graduation today. From what? She has a master's degree that she got? What was the deal?
Nova Southeastern Masters. It's either in human resources or business development. I don't know. Some very convoluted, impressive degree. And we've been taxed to be there. So
how smart are you, too? You're on the balls of your ass. You're working in radio. I mean, it's a very tenuous platform that we were working in. It was only a matter of time before we got canned. And you marry a wealthy family with a woman that works her ass off and makes a ton of money. That's the best move. You get the move of the year for getting married to the lovely Shirley. All right, good luck with that. And everybody, good luck with your wagers. Don't forget about Bet Online. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, very exciting time of the year. So many different things going on. We didn't even get into baseball. You got all kinds of strange stories coming out of there as well, including my man Paul Skeen's going to make his debut. He's my man now because we thought, Jesus, how does this guy not go straight off the mound in the College Baseball World Series and onto the mound in Major League Baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates who drafted him? And I think he's going to make his first Major League start on Saturday. And this guy looked like he was ready to go out of LSU, right? Paul Skeen's tremendous, just really composed pitcher and looked to be absolutely polished up and ready to go to the pros right out of college. That was pretty impressive what he did in the College Baseball World Series last year. All right, we have to get out of here. Good luck, Lubie, with all your endeavors today. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest, and that's today's edition of the Morning Briefing.